Hi, this is Linda Johnson Bell, and welcome to thewinelady.com. This is episode number 1 of my new YouTube series, and the first episode is conveniently has been covered by a question by one of my oldest friends, Marion, who was actually one of my bridesmaids, and she wrote to me, so here's my question. I love Malbec. It seems it's a wine that is not very common in France, where I come from. I discovered it abroad. Could you please tell me more about Malbec, its history, provenance, the best ones, best food to go with it, etc. Merci. Well, so this is all about Malbec for Marion in Malta. Marion, you've been drinking Malbec, the grape, and haven't known it. Because Malbec is one of the, or less so now, is one of the main grapes in the Bordeaux blend. It comes from Cahors in southwest France, where it's really comfortable in the limestone soils. It makes it, gives it a gorgeous mineral richness and a moderate tannin. There are about 100,000 acres of Malbec grown throughout the world, and you're quite right, Argentina has most of them, about 75,000 acres. Yeah, 76,000 acres. France is number 2 with about 15,000 acres, and that's distributed amongst Bordeaux and southwest France and a little bit in the Loire Valley. What's interesting is that in the Bordeaux blend, it's being used less and less. The main grapes in the Bordeaux blend are Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and Merlot. Now, that classic recipe is changing as we speak because of climate change. And it used to be that, and it still is, Cabernet Sauvignon is kind of the flower in the recipe. It kind of gives the wine its longevity. Cabernet Franc gives it a bit of, spiciness. The Merlot is the sweetest red grape, gives it the sugar. It's the sugar in the recipe, if you like. And Malbec was kind of added in to soften the Cabernet Sauvignon. But Malbec is very susceptible to climate. It's a very thin-skinned grape, and it was having quite a few problems with mildew and rot. And it's kind of been, weeded out. It's used less and less. Also, it's being used less and less is Merlot, because it's a very early ripening grape in Bordeaux, and with climate change it's having all kinds of problems, and they're using more and more Petit Verdot in that classic recipe. So Bordeaux as we know it is changing as we speak. So back to Malbec in I'll talk about the Argentinian Malbec. That's where we find most of it. That's where most people, they think Malbec is from Argentina, but obviously it was brought over from France. And I'm quite traditional in my politics about bringing grapes out of their indigenous environments to New World wine regions. It makes for a completely different taste of the grape, and some people call that just an interpretation of the grape. I find it often a deformation of the grape and its primary characters. But don't listen to me, make up your own mind. But there are 2 different taste profiles of a Malbec when it's grown either in France or when it's grown in Argentina. And because it is very thin-skinned, it doesn't like, it wants some sunshine but not too much sunshine. So for me, a Malbec grown in Cahors or somewhere else in southwest France is savory and meaty and plummy and rich, and it was spicy and has tobacco and leather in it. And once it's, because again, they don't irrigate, so you have nice small yields. That's climate change. They're starting to irrigate in southwest France, so that's our French Malbecs may start resembling the Argentinian Malbecs, because in Argentina they're big fans of flood irrigation, which was left over by the indigenous Indian populations there. So that grape, once it's subject to higher yields and huge amounts of sunshine, etc., it completely changes and it becomes much more fruit forward. It's a completely different wine when it's in Argentina. It's to my personal taste, it's more like a fruit bomb. You get more alcohol and fruit than you do get that gorgeous mineral structure. That said, there's some gorgeous Malbecs in Argentina, so I can't, I'm not going to just, with a gross generalization, wipe off the map, Argentinian Malbec. So they're completely 2 different tasting profiles based on the soil types, the way the wines are made, and the climate, and all of that. It's very important. And I prefer the French variation, if you like. You also asked about food matching. Well, I found this fabulous book called Pairing Wine and Food from this author, Linda Johnson Bell. And she says on page 160, Malbec, Bordeaux and New World, dry red. To pair it with beef Wellington, empanadas, roast lamb, etc. I would take that discussion a bit further and say the easiest way to match food and wine is to look at where it comes from and just match your soil bedfellows. If you're drinking a Malbec from Cahors, you're going to have it with a cassoulet, or aren't you? Or some kind of stew or something. If you're going to have it with, if you're going to be drinking an Argentinian Malbec, you'll drink it with whatever, an empanada, so the local, specialties there. And if you're drinking a Bordeaux, then you'll, marry it with all those classic recipes. There's a reason we have classic wine and food pairings like Sancerre and Cotin de Chauvignol. It's because they come from the cheese and the grapes are grown in the same soil a few kilometers away from each other. So you just follow nature. And that's difficult to do in the New World wine regions because, again, the wine grape is not indigenous to those regions. So in the New World, we kind of can mix whatever cuisine in it with wine that we want. But what you're looking at are alcohol and tannin, the weights and the textures of the wine. So these big, huge Malbecs from Argentina, the big alcoholic fruit bombs, can take much stronger food flavors like barbecued meats and spices and things like that. Whereas your more rustic, savory, French version would go then not very easily with those local foods. So that's how you match it up, and that's pretty easy. And something else I was going to say, you say you don't see it in France. Well, there are about, because they're tricking you, there are about 1,000 different names or synonyms for Malbec. I think they call it Auxerrois in some places, they call it Côte in Loire Valley, and so you're allowed to be confused about that. But Malbec is probably in the top 10, 12 of the French grapes, and it's a beautiful grape, and I hope that helps. I don't have any recommendations. I don't drink it very often, but now that you've brought it to my attention and made me remember it and think back on my notes, I'll be digging out some. I'll be looking out for some, and if I find any, I'll put them down. I'll add them to the notes on this video. There was a beautiful one a friend brought to dinner a couple months ago, and I've been asking him where he got that, so I'm going to chase that up and give that to you so you can have it for your delectation. So I hope that helps. That's episode number 1, Malbec from Marion in Malta. Thank you.